A wealthy businessman is murdered in his Florida home.
There was blood spatter everywhere. It was on the walls, on the sink, on the bathtub.
It was determined that 10 shots had been fired, and it could have been 2 shooters.
And there are plenty of suspects, all with a personal axe to grind.
His dad left him to hang out to dry, and also emotionally abused him.
It turned out my father had this woman that he's going to lunch with her, going to dinner with her.
Are you best friends?
Beyond best friends.
Did you shoot your father?
Absolutely not.
When a hidden journal reveals the truth, a killer's motive becomes crystal clear.
You really see the inner workings of her thoughts.
This is a classic case of love and revenge.
My father pushed her, and she snapped.
Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned.
Friday, September 30th, 2011. It's a warm fall day in the seaside town of Jupiter, Florida.
Jupiter, Florida, a beautiful place, right on the coast in South Florida, very affluent, nice area.
We have some famous people that live in there. It's a really, really high-end community.
But even the wealthy enclave known as Admiral's Cove isn't immune to violent crime. Just after 7 a.m., private security guards respond to alarms set off at the home of Lanny Horwitz, his wife Donna, and their 37-year-old son, Radley.
One of the alarms detected a glass break.
The guard at Admiral's Cove actually went to the house in a golf cart, and when he got to the door, he was greeted by Radley Horwitz.
He must have been, actually on the street at the time because he arrived really, really fast.
Radley tells the guard he doesn't know what happened.
I still don't remember if it was my phone alarm or the house alarm that woke me up, but it was gunfire and screaming and the alarm going off.
Donna Horwitz was standing in the living room, very upset.
She was saying, Radley, your father. And she said, he was so awful. But she kept repeating, he was so awful, he was so awful, he was so awful.
Donna appeared to experience some degree of shock over what she said she found. She suggested that it was a suicide, and that Lanny had been emotionally unstable and had talked about suicide.
Radley directs the guard to his father's bathroom, where he is met by a gruesome scene. Lying in the shower is 66-year-old Lanny Horwitz, covered in blood, with an apparent gunshot wound to his head.
The security guard saw Lanny on the floor with a gun in his hand. He did move the gun to the hallway, and then he tried to perform life-saving techniques and realized that Lanny wasn't breathing and there was no heartbeat.
Yes, this is Admiral Security calling in because we have a dead person.
Okay, did he shoot himself?
That's what it sounds like to me.
Okay, so he committed suicide.
Right.
This is a very secure, safe neighborhood, and there was no reason to expect that it had been anything but a suicide. When police arrived there at the house at Admiral's Cove, Donna Horwitz and Radley Horwitz were asked to be seated in the front seat of a car that remained in the driveway.
I remember I asked one of the cops, I'm like, is my dad, I felt like such an idiot, but I'm like, is my dad alive? He just shook his head, no.
The first thing I did was assess the scene in the bathroom. There was blood spatter everywhere, pretty much. It was on the walls, on the sink, on the bathtub.
The shower was still running. Mr. Horwitz was nude and had apparently been showering at the time that this had happened.
A single detail immediately stands out as odd to investigators.
He was kind of on his side, and there was a phone receiver next to his hand.
The way the blood splatter is, Lanny's trying to get to that phone that's in the bathroom, which if you're committing suicide, you're not going to try to pick up the phone.
Obviously, law enforcement wants to know what happened. What precipitated this event in this house? And was nobody else present?
I was shell-shocked. I couldn't believe that my dad was gone.
Born in Buffalo, New York on July 30th, 1945, Lanny Horwitz learned the power of money at a young age.
My dad's father was successful. He'd been a furrier, and then he got into real estate. So my dad grew up with 3 other siblings and had a happy, comfortable life growing up. But his father instilled a very good work ethic in him.
Lanny proved to be a natural entrepreneur and started building his own fortune at the age of 16.
He was very, very driven, very motivated. He was trading stocks. He was involved in real estate with his father, and he was a real go-getter.
Lanny was just as driven when it came to matters of the heart.
Lanny and Donna Horwitz met and started dating when she was about 15 and he was about 16.
The story my father told me was when he saw my mom coming down the stairs at this house that, like, he knew right then that's who he wanted to marry.
Donna, she had been raised with money.
My grandfather on my mom's side, Dan Carnevale, was very successful. He was a local baseball celebrity in Buffalo with the Bisons, and he knew absolutely everybody in town. My mom was very warm, and everybody loved her.
The two dated throughout their teenage years and got married in 1967, just before Donna's 21st birthday.
The families were supportive. The wedding made the paper and stuff like that because of my grandfather. Like, everybody was pretty happy.
4 years later, Lanny graduated from law school and continued to pursue a career in real estate.
And my thing with a law degree is it's like karate. It's very good to know, and you hope you never need it. So being a developer, it was extremely helpful for him in business.
Donna and Lanny had their son Radley in 1974. A few years after that, they moved to get away from the harsh New York winters.
Buffalo, New York, the blizzard of 77, they're still talking about up there. And my father was stuck downtown for several days in an office building. It was that bad of a storm. That was what convinced my parents to do the pilgrimage down to South Florida.
Real estate in Florida has historically been very profitable. This was a right place to be able to come and make money.
The move paid off. Lanny quickly found success in the Sunshine State.
He provided very well for the family. Donna was a homemaker.
In Jupiter, the place that my parents built it was called Admiral's Cove. It was a private community, water access, and very affluent, very nice, a lot of money, nice cars, boats, golf courses, tennis, all that sort of thing.
Radley Horwitz was an only child. He had a very good education. He was a well-educated, very smart young man.
Growing up, most of the memories were happy with my parents, and we took a lot of trips. London when I was a little kid. We were in Italy at the Vatican about a week before the Pope was shot. Went to Hawaii, and they started building this ridiculously big house up in Asheville, North Carolina.
To all outward appearances, the Horwitz family had it all.
They had a very high standard of living. I think there was a Maserati. They had the North Carolina home. They're flying first class. All the accoutrements to what people perceive as success.
But now, the good life has come to a tragic end. Initially called in as a suicide, Florida police are finding more evidence that Lanny's death may have involved foul play.
There was a bullet hole in the towel that was draped over the shower door, and it had stippling, which would be gunpowder burns on the outside of the towel, which tells you that the gunshot was from the outside and not coming from the inside of the shower.
It was clear to them that this was not a suicide.
Now we need to find out who killed Lanny Horwitz.
Coming up, scandalous secrets are exposed.
It looked like it was more than just a business relationship.
And detectives question whether they're looking for more than one suspect.
10 shots had been fired. It could have been 2 shooters.
After finding evidence that Lanny Horwitz was murdered, Florida police open a homicide investigation.
Once the medical examiner arrived, he rolled the body over and we were able to get a better look at the wounds on his body.
Even though you couldn't tell how many times he'd been shot, it was clear and obvious to the police that he'd been shot more than once.
We noticed there were multiple bullet wounds on his right arm, on his torso.
The medical examiner transports the body for further examination, leaving detectives to determine how and why the shooting happened and who did this.
There were projectiles pretty much everywhere in the bathroom. They were in the shower on the floor. There were some in the walls. There were some in the bathtub.
It was determined that 10 shots had been fired, at least one of which is what set the glass shatter alarm off.
The revolver found near Lanny's body provides an important clue.
The gun didn't have enough capacity to have fired all the number of bullets that had been fired.
So if the person was to use the same weapon, they would have to remove the casings and reload that firearm.
Investigators question if this could point to a second murder weapon or something even more sinister.
It could have been 2 shooters. There was a search warrant obtained from a judge to be able to search the house thoroughly from top to bottom.
In total, we collected about 26 firearms from the home. We weren't expecting to find that many firearms in the house.
There was a firearm found in a locked safe, and in the attic, there was a very extensive, expensive collection of firearms.
Most of the weapons are safely locked away and have not been fired recently. But they find one that has.
Another officer did find another firearm on the dresser in the master bedroom that's connected to where the bathroom is.
The gun is also a revolver with 5 spent casings. Detectives send the 2 revolvers to a crime lab for ballistics testing and continue their search.
They examined the perimeter of the home and determined that all the windows and doors were secure, locked from the inside. So there was no evidence that somebody had broken in.
Now we have to think, is it somebody who was let in the house? Was it somebody in the house?
It would be obvious that they would want to know from Bradley Horwitz and Donna Horwitz what's been going on.
Officers first try talking to Donna.
She was sitting in the front passenger seat of a car in the driveway. She was in her pajamas. She had bare feet. She had her knees up to her chest and rocking back and forth.
She kept saying, "Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy." And she just kept saying that sitting in the car, "Oh boy." My mom refused to talk to anybody.
She's not really communicating. She doesn't want to give a statement. So all of these things could be suggestive of somebody who's in a state of shock from trauma.
Her son, Radley, seems more capable of answering their questions.
The detectives asked to talk to me in their car, and they were parked right in front of the house. We sat in the car for maybe like 20 minutes. It was, so what did you see?
I was sound asleep, and it was like pop, pop, and the alarm was going off, and I heard screaming. I was scared.
My pocket door, there's a little alcove, and it looks across the living room and front entrance. My parents' bedroom was on the other side.
What was your mom's demeanor? How was she
She was screaming.
Was she saying anything, what happened, or what's going on?
She was distraught, and, I got her some water, and she calmed, down.
Through the bedroom door, he caught a glimpse of his father.
My father was laying on the floor facing away from me, and then he made that horrible gurgling noise, and I got out of there. I never went into the bathroom.
When asked why he didn't immediately call 911, Radley claims he was in shock, and the guards showed up before he had the chance.
He was very confused about what had happened and, obviously and understandably very upset.
Radley says he didn't see who shot his father, but wants to help investigators however he can.
I was trying to, cooperate with them. They asked if they could do a gunshot residue test on me. I'm like, okay. Let's do the test.
But when investigators ask him if he knows of any reason why someone might want to do this, he reveals his father wasn't exactly a saint.
There were allegations or accusations that Lanny developed an affair or a more than business relationship with his business partner.
My parents wound up getting divorced in, 2000, I think. After my parents divorced, my mom thought he'd been involved with Francine. But then when my mom and dad got back together, my mom finds out that my father's going to lunch with her, going to dinner with her.
He explained that Francine was an acquaintance, that she was actually in business with Mr. Horwitz.
My father kept telling her that she was just a business partner, but it looked like it was more than just a business relationship. There was a lot of sneaky stuff going on there with her.
So clearly, Radley also shed some light on that relationship. He was, shocked and disappointed that his dad was going to continue with this behavior, which clearly was upsetting to Donna Horwitz.
He brought me something to sign, some legal stuff. And I'm like, what's this? And he goes, oh, I'm just doing something with the life insurance. Just sign that. So I sign it. And I found out later, I signed over $200,000 of his life insurance money to Francine.
That tells me that there's motivation there. She could have been looking to angle that for herself.
After learning of Lanny Horwitz's possible affair, detectives need to have conversations with the women in his life.
Our goal was, if one of them would agree to talk to us, we would let them tell us what happened. Donna Horwitz got an attorney right away, and we were informed by the attorney that she would not be speaking with us.
Thankfully, Radley knows where they can find Francine.
Francine lived right down the street, so she was in the same development.
detectives pay her a visit and deliver news of Lanny's murder.
She was very distraught, very emotionally upset, almost in shock.
Obviously, we've just explained to you that Lanny, who you know, has been found dead. Okay.
How old and why?
Well, we'll explain all that to you, but we'd like to ask you a few questions first.
Francine says she and Lanny were supposed to be leaving that morning on a business trip to North Carolina.
We couldn't wait.
Okay.
He had planned this whole entire week of such fun to go far in.
To investigators, it sounds like more than just business, which seems to confirm Radley's suspicions.
Okay. If you don't mind my asking just a personal question, are you
Never.
Okay. So you're just friends?
Your best friend.
She found him to be very near and dear to her heart. She indicated, though, that Mr. Horwitz had deeper feelings for her than she was ready for at that time. She admitted that Mr. Horwitz had asked her to marry him, but she had declined that offer because, as she explained it, she was recently divorced and wasn't ready to move on.
Well, we were told that you and he had a relationship.
Oh, by her?
But that's not.
When they ask Francine about the life insurance policy, she says she didn't expect anything from Lanny.
Do you know who his beneficiary is on his will?
He said to me, Fran, I took care of you. I said, what? He said, I'm not going to laugh. Is it going to be a penny? Joking, nickel. Right. And he goes, you'll see. Joking. Always joking.
Police did ask Francine where she had been around 7 a.m. She was able to fairly readily prove to them that she'd gotten up and was packing and getting ready to pick him up at 8. Clearly, she was very distraught about what had happened to him. And, they were confident that Francine didn't have anything to do with this.
According to Francine, investigators should be looking at Lanny's wife, Donna Horwitz.
Francine told police that Donna Horwitz and Lanny Horwitz had been married, divorced. And there was discontent and arguments and a volatile kind of a relationship.
Francine tells investigators Lanny recently hit a breaking point and asked Donna to move out.
Francine told police that Lanny Horwitz had confided in her that he was afraid of Donna. According to Francine, she had said to Lanny Horwitz, you need to hide your guns.
When they ask her about Radley Horwitz, she has a similar response.
Is he your son?
We don't know. That's what we're trying to find out.
He's not a trophy son.
Okay.
Just some baby.
Right.
He said to me, if anything happens to me, promise me that you will fight to the end to see that I get justice.
Based on Francine's interview, Donna and Radley could both have motive. And when the autopsy results come in, they point to a crime of passion.
It was concluded that there were 9 bullet wounds, including one to the mouth.
The last shot in the mouth is overkill. That's an emotional reaction. That's a reaction that usually comes with anger or rage.
So police talked to the alarm company. In this case, in looking at the display panel of the alarm, no door had been opened prior to the 911 call.
There were only 2 people that could be suspects, Donna and Radley. Either Radley did it, Donna did it, or they both did it together.
Coming up, detectives pit son against mother.
Based on what you told us about the morning, it just seems like there's still something missing here.
But their suspects both refuse to crack.
He said, all I can tell you is there were only 2 of us in the house, and I didn't do it.
It's been 6 days since the brutal murder of Lanny Horwitz. And after speaking with Francine, investigators are determined to get answers. Radley Horwitz proves to be more cooperative than his mother.
His attorney arranged for him to arrive at the Jupiter Police Department for a videotaped and audiotaped interview with detectives.
Let's go over again. You tell us in your words what happened that morning.
I just saw like my mom screaming and running like in and out of the bedroom.
Radley goes on to describe hearing a clicking noise, as if a gun was running out of ammo but still being triggered.
Was the gun still in her hand?
You know, I don't know, so I'm not going to say. I don't know.
Detectives suspect Radley is holding back, so they push harder.
Based on what you told us about the morning, it just seems like there's still something missing here. I just want to ask you, did you shoot your father? Or were you involved in any way?
Absolutely not. I did not shoot my father. I was not involved in any way. I was woken up to gunfire.
Radley would only ever tell us, all I can tell you is there were only 2 of us in the house and I didn't do it.
Despite his insistence, Radley does admit his relationship with his father was rocky at times.
I remember them asking me if my dad was abusive, and I said only mentally. I used the term needling at the time, like that he could push your buttons.
The source of their conflict was connected to Radley's past legal problems.
My parents got me into guns when I was younger, and I really took to it. So I decided to get an FFL license, federal firearms license, and start a little gun business.
So we wanted to, at one point, buy an accessory that would transform a gun, that was not automatic into an automatic weapon, and didn't know if it was legal or not.
I showed it to my dad. I'm like, oh my God, look what these guys are selling online, this thing. And he says, just order it. And he's the smart one. He's the lawyer.
According to Radley, he said, I followed his advice and I bought it. Well, of course, the ATF in short order arrested Radley for purchasing that equipment.
As a result of that arrest, Radley's vehicle was confiscated and he was sentenced to federal prison.
I got 5 months down in a minimum security camp in Miami.
Because of the firearms conviction, Radley Horwitz was forbidden by law to ever possess a gun. He couldn't have his shop, and he largely blamed his father for that.
That was a huge, huge part of my life that was taken from me.
Radley has just confirmed his own potential motive for killing Lanny.
Radley was a suspect. I mean, there's no 2 ways about it. Again, 3 people in the home, 1's dead.
We knew at the conclusion of his statement, we wanted to go back to the house and see if anything was in there that was corroborative of what he was talking about. When he told us he went to his door and could look and see into the living room from there, could he really? So we went and looked ourselves to see that, yeah, you could see into the living room. And so it corroborated that he could see what he said he saw.
During Radley's interview, he also said after the shooting, he brought his mother a bottle of water to calm down.
Where'd the bottle of water go? We checked in the bathroom where Lanny Horwitz lay on the ground. There was a single water bottle on the sink right above his head. So we collected that water bottle to be processed for DNA. We're basically able to corroborate just about anything and everything that Radley Horwitz told us.
The detectives got the results back from Radley's GSR test, which was negative.
They didn't do it on my mom because she asked for a lawyer first.
Those results, and Donna's continued refusal to speak with them, lead investigators to one conclusion.
If Bradley didn't hurt his dad, it started to paint a pretty clear picture and corroborate what we had sort of suspected to begin with. It actually was Donna, and we need to prove it.
Donna Horwitz has become the prime suspect in her husband's murder. But since she refuses to talk, detectives must find another way to get answers.
While I was processing the water bottle for DNA, detectives found Donna's journal.
In her walk-in closet were lingerie drawers and small item drawers like that. And in one of those drawers was the book. It was an actual diary that dated back for quite a little bit.
Donna's diary reveals the Horwitz's lavish lifestyle to be nothing but a mirage.
Lanny Horwitz was upside down on the house. He was in dire need of money.
The most recent entries are about Donna's attempts to put her troubled marriage back together.
Beginning in January of 2011, the entries are just about daily, and they're very lengthy and very detailed. The diary was really black and white evidence in Donna's own words.
You really see the inner workings of her thoughts about this was the script that she had set in her mind for a happy life for both herself and Lanny.
It depicted a woman in Donna who desperately wants a family, but then we see her getting lost in her own self, her own mind. The diary starts to, he doesn't come home again. He's with Francine. He's this. And the reality of how Lanny's treating her happens.
Detectives learned that in the spring of 2011, while the couple were divorced and living apart, Lanny asked her to secure a $200,000 loan from her parents.
He shared with her that if she could borrow this amount of money, they could move in together again. Donna believed together, if we can get this $200,000, we can get married again, we can be a family again.
But after Donna gets that money from her parents, she discovers Lanny isn't as invested in saving their marriage.
He would say, I'll be home at 5 o'clock and we have dinner. And, he would share with her, oh, Francine and I had to go to a business dinner. We got tied up.
She'd written in there about it was my birthday and we had hot dogs for the grill, but he took her to Three Forks on her birthday, which is a very nice steakhouse.
According to her diary, Lanny told her, if I had known that Francine felt about me the way that I do now, I would never have asked you to move back in the house. I think that was the turning point.
After that, her diary entries take a darker turn.
Donna becomes more and more aware of all the pieces of the puzzle that spell a different reality than the one that she's forecasted for herself and her family.
Donna couldn't even lie to herself anymore. She knew she got taken. And here she had gotten $200,000 from her mom, and what a fool she must have felt like.
You see Donna's words getting worse and worse and worse and rising in intensity through the diary to the explosion that is the homicide.
The last entry prior to the shooting, I think, was a week or two earlier, which was totally also telling because it'd been every day and then it got fewer and fewer, and then just before the killing, there's nothing.
My father pushed her and pushed her and pushed her, and she snapped.
The diary, combined with the evidence collected from the house, gives detectives a clearer picture of how the shooting took place.
On the day before this crime occurred, he had plans on leaving for a couple of days to North Carolina with Francine. Matter of fact, he had his bags packed.
And he told her that he wanted her out of the house by the time he got back.
Now he wants to break up the family. Now he's very much made a definitive statement about, not only am I doing this, but I want you out of my life. So Hope, to connect together with him, disappears at that point.
If she couldn't have Lanny, no one was going to have Lanny. And she taught him a lesson. She just reacted with that firearm. Both firearms.
Ballistics confirm that after emptying all 5 rounds in the first revolver, Donna retrieved a second pistol from the bedroom and emptied that one too.
The total number of gunshots is clearly indicative of first-degree murder. That's somebody that clearly intends that the target of their shooting, they want them dead.
That was not a defensive shooting, a protect myself shooting. That was, you MFer, how could you do this to us?
On October 6, 2011, 1 week after Lanny's death, Donna Horwitz is arrested.
The hardest part of this entire case was trying to present the evidence in a methodical, logical, sequential form that a jury using common sense would come to the right decision. And we wanted to make sure we got it right.
In January 2013, Donna Horwitz stands trial for first-degree murder. Prosecutors paint her as a woman pushed to the brink by her husband's betrayal.
This was a jilted woman. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned.
We basically felt that a jury using its common sense would come to that same conclusion, that this is a classic case of love and revenge.
I remember Alethea McRoberts saying about, because the last shot was into his mouth, and that she said that you could tell it was a very vengeful, spiteful thing.
She may have just had enough with him speaking ill and silenced him.
Any bit of sympathy that I had left for my mom was gone when I saw those color pictures of the worst thing I've ever seen.
The defense ultimately decides to claim Donna was innocent and points the finger at someone else.
They argued that it was Radley that did it.
My mom's lawyer said, I resented my father, and, either that I did it myself or that I hired a hitman.
That's terrible. Like, you talk about not winning Mom of the Year. That's not Mom of the Year. Knew it was a bad defense.
He was living for free in a very nice house in Admiral's Cove, with his dad. He had nothing to gain by hurting his dad.
The prosecution argues that the only thing less likely than Radley shooting his father is him hiring someone else to do it for him.
From our perspective, it didn't make a lot of sense. That was foolish to suggest that you pay good money, a lot of money to hire a professional hitman, and they don't bring their own gun. And there was no evidence of a third person. By checking with the alarm company, there had been no ingress or egress through a door prior to the glass shatter.
On January 17, 2013, the jury is left to consider its verdict.
After about 2 hours of deliberation, they found her guilty as charged of first-degree murder with a firearm, and she was thereafter sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Donna immediately appeals her conviction.
At the very, very end of the trial, the last seconds of the trial, the assistant prosecutor got up there and said, "Oh, by the way, she refused to talk to the police that morning, so,
You can't comment on a defendant's right to remain silent. That's a constitutional issue.
Approximately 2 years after the conviction and sentence, the appellate court felt that was significant enough to reverse the case for a new trial. The retrial, the strategy didn't change. We just went forward and retried the case again, almost identical to the first time.
4 years after Donna's first conviction, she is found guilty again.
She got a 32-year sentence, which is effectively a life sentence.
I do think justice was served. It's tragic that she was so heartbroken, but you just can't go and kill the person that broke your heart.
For mom to kill the father and then to blame your son, Donna will have to reconcile her life when Judgment Day comes for her, and I don't believe it'll be pretty for a person like her.
even though she tried to blame me, I was very sympathetic still to my mom until I saw the pictures of my dad, morgue autopsy pictures. And that was the end of any sympathy for my mom there. When I say I miss my parents, I miss, when I was growing up, when things were good. But, I don't miss the people that they became at all. What my parents did to me, I'm still here and they're not. And I sleep just fine at night.
The call came in just after midnight. A whisper, thin and trembling, cutting through static like a blade through glass. Then a pause, a breath, and one sentence that would claw its way back from the grave after nearly 4 decades. Check the house on Marlowe Street. It was never an accident. The line went dead before the operator could respond. At first, it sounded like nothing. Another crank call, another ghost chasing attention. But something about the voice, tight, controlled, almost afraid of being heard, lingered in the air long after the connection was gone. Enough to log it, enough to pass it up, enough to wake something that had been buried since 1987. A file was pulled the next morning. Dust lifted in a thin gray cloud as the cabinet opened. The label was faded, nearly unreadable. California, 1987, closed. Inside, the story looked clean. Too clean. A woman named Lena Carter, 26 years old, found at the bottom of her staircase in a quiet suburban home on Marlowe Street. No signs of forced entry. No defensive wounds recorded.
No suspects.
Cause of death: blunt force trauma consistent with a fall. Case closed within 72 hours. Back then, it made sense. Or, at least it passed for sense. A young woman alone in her house. A slip. A fall. A tragic accident that neighbors would shake their heads over before returning to their routines. It was the kind of story that resolved itself quickly because people needed it to. But even in 1987, not everyone believed it. Neighbors remembered that night differently. They remembered noise. A sudden, sharp crack that echoed through the street just after 10 p.m. Not the soft thud of someone slipping, but something harder, violent, followed by voices.
Raised. Urgent.
Then silence. No one called it in. No one wanted to be wrong. And then there was the husband, Daniel Carter. He told police he wasn't home when it happened. Said he'd been out driving,
Clearing his head.
Said he came back to find Lena at the bottom of the stairs, her body twisted at an angle that didn't look natural. He said he panicked. Said he tried to wake her. Said he called for help. He said all the right things. But people remembered what he didn't do. He didn't cry. Not when the ambulance arrived. Not when the police questioned him. Not at the funeral. He stood still through it all, hands in his pockets, eyes distant,
Detached.
like he was watching something unfold that he already understood. That detail never made it into the official report, but it stayed with the people who saw him. And sometimes, that's where the truth hides, not in the paperwork, but in the parts no one writes down. The file sat untouched for 37 years. Until now. The anonymous call changed everything. Detectives reopened the case with fresh eyes, and immediately, the cracks began to show. The language in the original report felt vague, overly simplified. Words like consistent with repeated over and over, as if certainty had been replaced with convenience. They requested the original evidence. What remained of it? Boxes were retrieved from storage, seals broken, contents catalogued again under modern standards. And then came the photographs. They had never been released to the public. Black and white images, slightly overexposed, capturing the interior of the house exactly as it was found that night. The staircase, the living room, the narrow hallway leading toward the kitchen. And Lena, at the base of the stairs. At first glance, it looked exactly like the report described. But modern analysis doesn't stop at first glance. They zoomed in, adjusted contrast, enhanced details that technology in 1987 couldn't touch. And that's when it appeared. Faint discoloration around the wrists. Not consistent with a fall. Too symmetrical. Too defined. Marks that suggested pressure. Restraint. The room shifted. What had been labeled an accident started to look like something else entirely. Something controlled. Something intentional. They moved to the autopsy report next. Again simple.
Direct.
Almost rushed. Blunt force trauma to the head. Fatal. Injuries consistent with falling down a staircase. But when the measurements were re-examined, the angles didn't align. The fractures on the skull suggested a direct impact, horizontal, not vertical. The kind of force you'd expect from an object, not gravity. And then there was the blood. Minimal, according to the report. Too minimal. A fall from that height, with that level of trauma, should have produced more. There should have been spatter along the steps. Transfer patterns. Signs of movement. But the staircase in the photos was almost clean. As if whatever happened didn't happen there. Which meant the body might have been moved.
Staged.
The word hung in the air like a threat.
Staged.
Suddenly, everything changed. Detectives began reconstructing the timeline. They went back to the neighbors. The ones still alive. The ones who hadn't forgotten. One remembered a car that night, parked just beyond the corner. Engine idling. Lights off. Another remembered hearing two voices inside the house. Not one.
A man.
And someone else. Unfamiliar. That detail had never been followed up. Or, if it had disappeared. Then they found Lena's sister. Emily Carter. She had avoided all contact for years. Refused interviews. Changed addresses. Cut herself off from anything connected to Marlowe Street. Until the case reopened. She walked into the station without being asked. Sat down.
And spoke.
Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. She didn't start with the night Lena died. She started with the weeks before. She said Lena had been scared. Not in a vague way. Not in a passing comment. Terrified. She had called Emily late at night more than once, whispering, saying someone had been in the house, saying things were being moved, doors left open, objects missing, then reappearing in places she hadn't put them. At first, Emily thought it was stress. But then Lena said something that didn't fit. He has a key. Emily had asked who. Lena didn't answer directly. She just said, I didn't give it to him. That line stayed buried for decades. Until now. Detectives pressed for more. Emily hesitated. Then she gave them a name. Not a stranger. Not an outsider. Someone connected to both Lena and Daniel. Someone who had access. Someone who had been inside that house before without raising suspicion.
Family.
The investigation widened instantly. Records were pulled. Old connections mapped out. Phone logs reconstructed as much as possible from archived billing data. And slowly, a second presence began to take shape. A figure in the background of Lena's life. Always nearby. Always just outside the center of attention. And on the night she died, possibly inside the house. Detectives returned to Marlowe Street. The house hadn't changed much. Same narrow staircase. Same layout. Same quiet street that looked like nothing had ever happened there. But something had. And this time, they weren't going to miss it. They brought in new equipment. Ground-penetrating scanners. Chemical analysis tools. Methods that didn't exist in 1987. They started with the staircase. Every step examined. Every inch tested. And then they found it. One step, slightly different from the rest. Barely noticeable. But not original. It had been replaced.
Carefully. Cleanly.
As if someone had removed it and then put it back.
They pulled it apart.
Underneath, hidden in the grain of the wood, were traces. Microscopic. Invisible to the naked eye. But undeniable.
Blood.
Old. Degraded. But still there. And not in a pattern consistent with a fall. More like impact. A single point.
Hard. Direct.
The kind of strike that doesn't happen by accident. The kind that ends a life in seconds. The room fell silent as the results came in. Because now, there was no ambiguity left. No room for interpretation. This wasn't a tragic fall. It was a murder. And for 37 years, it had been hidden in plain sight. The call had been right. It was never an accident. And whoever had whispered that message into the darkness knew exactly what they were waking up. The evidence didn't just reopen the case. It rewrote it. Within hours of confirming the blood traces beneath the staircase, the tone inside the department shifted. What had been treated as a procedural review became something sharper, more urgent. The past was no longer distant. It was active, breathing again. And somewhere, someone who had lived comfortably for 37 years felt it. The name Emily Carter had given them sat at the center of everything now. It didn't explode across the room. It didn't shock anyone into immediate certainty. But it changed the direction of every question. Mark Halperin. Daniel Carter's older cousin. A man who had never once been mentioned in the original report. Not as a witness. Not as a person of interest. Not at all. Which in itself was a problem. Because records showed something the original investigators had either missed or ignored. Mark had been in town the night Lena died. Not just in town. On Marlowe Street. A parking citation surfaced from old municipal archives, buried, forgotten, digitized decades later. It placed his car less than 50 yards from the Carter house at 9:42 p.m. 18 minutes before neighbors reported hearing the crash. That wasn't coincidence. That was proximity. Detectives pulled everything they could find on Mark Halperin. The file was thin at first glance. No major criminal record.
No antecedentes.
A quiet history. Work in construction. Short-term contracts. Frequent moves. The kind of life that left very little behind. But quiet doesn't mean clean.
It just means harder to see.
They dug deeper. Old employment records. Financial statements. Phone logs reconstructed through archived billing summaries. And patterns began to emerge. Not loud, not obvious, but consistent. Mark had debts in 1987. Significant ones. Unpaid loans, late notices, pressure building in the months leading up to Lena's death. At the same time, Daniel Carter's finances told a different story. Stable. Growing. A recent life insurance policy taken out on Lena just 8 weeks before she died. A policy worth enough to erase every one of Mark's debts overnight. That wasn't proof. But it wasn't nothing. The pieces started aligning in a way that made the air in the room feel tighter. Detectives revisited Daniel's original statement. Line by line. Word by word. He claimed he had been driving alone that night. No destination.
No stops. Just time to think.
But there were no receipts.
No witnesses. No confirmation.
Back then, that had been enough. Now, it wasn't. They ran the timeline again, this time with Mark in it. Mark arrives on Marlowe Street just before 10 p.m. His car parked out of direct sight. Engine running. Lights off. Waiting. Inside the house, Lena is alone. Or at least she believes she is. A key turns quietly in the lock. No forced entry. No sign of intrusion. Because it isn't intrusion. It's access. What happens next doesn't leave fingerprints in reports. It leaves fragments in memory.
Broken sounds.
Half-heard voices. A confrontation.
2 men.
1 woman. Raised voices echoing through the narrow hallway. Words that no one would ever fully recall, only the tone, sharp, urgent, escalating. Then impact. Not a fall. A strike. Fast, decisive, final. The kind of violence that doesn't spiral. It ends. And then silence. But silence doesn't mean stillness. Because what follows isn't panic. It's control. The body is moved. Positioned at the base of the stairs.
Carefully.
Deliberately. The scene is shaped into something simpler. Something believable. A fall. An accident. Something that doesn't require questions. And for a long time it works. Back in the present, detectives tracked Mark Halpern's movements after 1987. He didn't stay in California. Within 2 weeks of Lena's death, he left. No forwarding address filed locally. No public statement.
Just gone.
He resurfaced years later under the same name, but in different places. Nevada, Arizona, briefly in Texas. Each time, staying just long enough to establish a footprint, then moving on. Patterns of avoidance. Or patterns of survival. They issued a request to locate him. No warrant yet. Not enough for that. But enough to find him. And that's when things took another turn. Because Mark wasn't hiding. He was dead. Records showed he had died 9 years earlier. A reported accident. Single vehicle crash on a rural highway outside Flagstaff. No other cars involved.
No witnesses.
Just a vehicle that left the road and rolled into a shallow ravine. Cause of death. Blunt force trauma. The file was thin. Minimal investigation. Closed quickly. A quiet ending to a quiet life. Except now, nothing about it felt quiet anymore. Because the pattern was too familiar. Blunt force trauma. Minimal scrutiny. Closed case. Detectives requested the file. Photos. Reports. Anything that remained. And when they laid those images side by side with Lena's, the resemblance was impossible to ignore. Different scenes. Different years. Same outcome. And suddenly the question shifted. Was Mark just part of Lena's death? Or had something come back for him? The possibility hung there, unspoken but heavy. Because if Lena's death had been staged, then Mark's might have been too. which meant this case wasn't just reopening one night in 1987. It was unraveling a chain, one that stretched further than anyone had expected. Back in California, attention turned to Daniel Carter again. He hadn't disappeared like Mark. He had simply faded. Changed cities, changed jobs, kept a low profile. But he was still there. Still alive. And now, for the first time in decades, detectives had enough to bring him in. They found him in a small town just outside Sacramento. A modest house, quiet street, no signs of anything unusual. He answered the door himself. Older now, thinner, but the eyes were the same. Distant. Detached. Like he had been waiting for something he didn't want to arrive. They didn't arrest him. Not yet. They asked him to come in. He didn't resist. Inside the interrogation room, time seemed to collapse in on itself. 1987, and the present sitting across from each other in silence. They started simple. Revisited the story he had told decades ago.
The drive.
The return home. Finding Lena. He repeated it almost perfectly. Word for word. As if he had memorized it. As if he had been repeating it to himself for years. But something had changed. Because now they had Mark. They placed the parking record on the table. The timestamp. The location. Watched his eyes as he saw it. A flicker. Small. But real. Then they showed him the photos. The staircase. The blood beneath the step. The wrist marks. And finally they said the name. Mark Halperin. The room went still. For a moment, Daniel said nothing. Then he leaned back slightly. Exhaled. Not surprised. Not shocked. Just tired. Like the weight of something long buried had finally shifted. And in that silence, the past began pressing forward again. Because for 37 years, the story had held. Simple.
Clean.
Untouched. But stories like that don't survive forever. They fracture. They break. And when they do, everything underneath starts to surface.
Piece by piece.
Truth by truth. Whether anyone is ready for it or not. Daniel Carter didn't answer right away. The silence stretched thin, like something about to snap. The hum of the fluorescent light above them filled the room, steady, mechanical, indifferent. Across the table, the photographs remained where they had been placed, evidence that no longer asked questions, only demanded answers. Daniel's eyes lingered on one image longer than the others. The staircase. That single step. He knew. Of course he knew. His fingers moved slightly, not enough to be called nervous, but enough to betray something beneath the surface. A tremor, controlled, contained. The kind of movement that comes from holding something in for far too long. "You found him?" he asked finally, voice low, almost flat. The question landed wrong. Not what did you find? Not why am I here? You found him. Detectives didn't respond immediately. They let the words sit in the air, heavy with implication. Mark Halperin, one of them said, calm, direct. Your cousin. Another pause. Then a nod. Slow. Measured. Daniel leaned back, eyes drifting for a moment, not to the door, not to the officers, but somewhere inward. Somewhere distant. Like he was looking at a memory he had spent decades trying not to revisit. He shouldn't have come that night, Daniel said. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't even a defense. It was the first crack. The room shifted. Detectives leaned forward slightly, not interrupting, not pushing too hard. Because moments like this they break if you press them too quickly. He wasn't supposed to be there, Daniel continued. That wasn't the plan. The word plan hung in the air like a loaded weapon. There it was. Not an accident. Not a misunderstanding. A plan. What plan, Daniel? The detective asked quietly. Daniel's jaw tightened. For a moment, it looked like he might shut down, pull back, retreat into the same silence that had protected him for 37 years. But something had changed. Maybe it was the evidence. Maybe it was the time. Or maybe it was the fact that Mark was already gone. No one left to protect. No one was supposed to get hurt, Daniel said. Another line that didn't hold. Because someone had. Lena. Always Lena. Detectives let the silence stretch again, letting him feel the weight of that contradiction. No one was supposed to get hurt, Daniel repeated, softer now. We just needed time. Time for what? That question didn't need to be asked out loud. It was already forming in the space between them. Daniel's eyes dropped to the table.
To fix things, he said. Money, debts.
Everything was collapsing. Marquis said he could help.
Of course he did.
Men like Mark always had a solution.
Quick, clean,
temporary. Until it wasn't. What did he suggest? The detective asked. Daniel didn't look up. A break-in, he said. Make it look like someone came in, took a few things. Insurance would cover it. We'd get enough to breathe. To catch up. Insurance. There it was again. But not the life insurance policy. Something smaller. Something less final. At least at first. And Lena? The detective asked. Daniel's expression tightened. She didn't know, he said. She wasn't supposed to know. But she did. That much was already clear. She came home early, Daniel added, almost to himself. That wasn't supposed to happen either. The timeline snapped into place. Mark inside the house. Daniel outside, or maybe just arriving. Lena walking into something she wasn't meant to see. A plan unraveling in real time. What happened when she came in? The detective pressed. Daniel's hands clasped together now, fingers interlocking, knuckles widening slightly.
She saw him, he said.
She knew something was wrong immediately. Started asking questions.
Loud. Fast.
She didn't stop. Because Lena wasn't passive. She wasn't the kind of person who ignored something like that. She pushed. And pushing changes outcomes. Mark tried to calm her down, Daniel continued. Said it was nothing. Said he was just checking something. But she didn't believe him. Of course she didn't. He told me to handle it, Daniel said, voice tightening. Told me to make her understand. That moment. That exact moment. The line between plan and disaster. What did you do? The detective asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. His breathing shifted, slower, heavier. I tried to explain, he said. Told her it wasn't what it looked like. Told her we needed the money. That it was temporary. And Lena? She didn't accept it. She said she was calling the police, Daniel whispered. There it was. The turning point. The moment everything changed. What happened next, Daniel? The question landed softer this time, but heavier. Because they both knew what came after. Daniel's eyes closed briefly. Like he was replaying it frame by frame. Mark moved first, he said. Not him. Mark. The shift of blame, subtle but intentional. He grabbed her, Daniel continued. Told her to stop. Told her she was overreacting. The wrist marks. Finally explained.
She fought, Daniel said.
Of course she fought. Because Lena wasn't going to just stand there. She tried to pull away. She screamed. And then...
He stopped.
The room held its breath. And then, the detective repeated. Daniel opened his eyes. There was something in Mark's hand, he said. I didn't even see where he got it. A tool. From his bag. Construction. Of course.
He swung it, Daniel said.
No hesitation this time.
No deflección.
Just fact. Once. The word echoed. Once was enough. The kind of strike that doesn't leave room for correction. The kind that ends everything in a single motion.
She dropped, Daniel said.
Flat. Final. No drama. Just the end. Silence filled the room again, heavier than before. Because now it wasn't speculation. It was a confession. Not complete. Not clean. But real. What did you do after that? The detective asked. Daniel swallowed. We just stood there for a second, he said. Neither of us moved. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. No one ever plans for the moment things go wrong. They only plan for the version where they don't. Mark said we had to think, Daniel continued. Had to fix it. Fix it. Like it was a problem. Not a person. He told me we could still make it look like an accident, Daniel said. Said people fall all the time. Said it would work. And in 1987 it did. We carried her, Daniel said quietly. The words barely above a whisper now. To the stairs. Every detail aligning with what the evidence had already revealed. Placed her there, he continued. Moved things around. Made it look right. Made it look right. As if there was a correct way to stage a death. As if that could erase what had just happened, the detective said. Daniel didn't respond. Because it couldn't. And it hadn't. Not completely. Why replace the step? The detective asked. A small detail. But one that mattered. Daniel hesitated. Blood, he said. There was more than we expected. It got into the wood. Mark said it might show. Said we couldn't risk it. So they removed it. Replaced it.
Covered it.
Hoping time would do the rest. And for a while it did. Until now. The room fell quiet again. But this silence was different. It wasn't waiting.
It was settling.
Because the truth, once spoken, doesn't go back. It stays. It lingers. And it changes everything around it. But one question still remained. One piece that didn't fit. And Mark, the detective asked. What happened to him after? Daniel looked up slowly. For the first time, there was something else in his eyes. Not fear. Not guilt. Something closer to recognition. Like he had been waiting for that question. He left, Daniel said. Took his share. Said we'd never talk about it again. And they didn't. For years. Decades. Until something broke. Did you ever hear from him again? The detective asked. A pause. Then a small, almost imperceptible shake of the head. No, Daniel said. But the way he said it. It wasn't entirely true. Because something in his expression shifted. Just for a second. A flicker. The kind that doesn't match the words being spoken. And detectives saw it. They always do. Because even when the truth comes out, it rarely comes out all at once. And whatever Daniel Carter wasn't saying was still out there. Waiting. Just beneath the surface. Like everything else in this case. Unfinished. Unsettled. And far from over. Daniel Carter's answer sat in the room, incomplete. No, he had said. But the word didn't land clean. It dragged. It carried something underneath it, something heavier than denial, thinner than truth. Detectives didn't interrupt. They didn't rush to expose it. Because when a lie is fragile, the worst thing you can do is touch it too soon. They let it breathe. You never heard from him again, the detective repeated, not as a question, but as a mirror. Daniel's eyes drifted again, just slightly.
Not toward the door.
Not toward the table. Somewhere inward. Somewhere that didn't match the certainty of his voice. That's right, he said. Too quick this time. The crack widened. Because the timeline didn't support it anymore. They already had Mark Halperin's movements after 1987. They knew where he had been. Roughly. Not precisely, but enough to form a pattern. Enough to know he hadn't vanished immediately. Enough to know he hadn't been silent forever. And now, they needed Daniel to step into that gap. They slid another file across the table. Different color. Different weight. Mark Halperin, Arizona, 1998. Daniel didn't touch it. He didn't need to. He knew what it was. You said you never heard from him again, the detective continued, calm, measured. But records show something else.
No accusation.
No raised voice. Just pressure.
Phone logs, the detective said.
Not detailed. Not complete. But enough. There were calls. From Arizona. Late 90s. To a number registered under your name. Daniel's jaw tightened again.
A smaller movement this time.
Harder to hide. Short calls, the detective added. A minute. Sometimes less. No messages left. Just contact. The room went quiet. Because now, silence wasn't protection. It was exposure. He said it was nothing, Daniel muttered. There it was. Not a denial. A correction. He said it was nothing, the detective repeated. Who did? Daniel exhaled slowly. Mark, he said. And just like that, the timeline stretched forward again. Years beyond Lena's death. Years where the past didn't stay buried. What did he want? The detective asked. Daniel hesitated. Longer this time. Because this part hadn't been planned for. He just checked in, Daniel said. That's all. The answer didn't hold. Not in this room. Not with everything else already laid out. People don't call after 10 years just to check in, the detective said quietly. Not after something like this. Daniel didn't respond. Because he couldn't. Because they were right. He wanted money, Daniel said finally.
Simple. Direct.
And exactly what they expected. How much? The detective asked. At first not much, Daniel replied. Just enough to help him out. Said he was struggling. Said things hadn't worked out. The story felt familiar. It echoed the same pattern that had led to Lena's death in the first place.
Debt.
Pressure. Shortcuts. He reminded me, Daniel added. Another piece falling into place. Reminded you of what? Daniel looked up. This time, his eyes met the detective's directly. Of what happened, he said. Blackmail. The word didn't need to be spoken. It was already there. He said if I didn't help him, he'd start talking, Daniel continued. Said accidents don't stay accidents forever.
And he was right.
They don't. How long did that go on? The detective asked. Daniel's fingers pressed tighter together now. Years, he said. On and off. Sometimes months without anything. Then a call. Always the same.
Short. Direct.
Enough to remind me he was still there. Still watching. Still holding the truth like leverage. And you paid him? The detective asked. Daniel nodded. At first. At first. The words hung there, incomplete again. Until what? The detective pressed. Daniel's expression shifted. Something darker this time. Something closer to anger than fear.
Until I stopped, he said.
The tone had changed. Less controlled. More personal. Why? the detective asked. Daniel leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose. Because it never ended, he said. There was always another call, another excuse, another reason he needed more. That's how it works. It doesn't stop. It grows. He said he'd come back, Daniel added. Said if I didn't pay, he'd come back to California. Said he'd tell everyone. The threat wasn't just exposure anymore. It was proximity. Mark coming back. Mark standing in the same place again. Mark reopening something Daniel had spent years trying to keep sealed. So, what did you do? The detective asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. But this silence wasn't hesitation. It was calculation. I told him no, he said finally. Told him it was over. Told him to do whatever he wanted. A risky move. Desperate. Or final. And what did he say? The detective asked. Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. He laughed, he said. Of course he did. Because men like Mark don't let go easily. He said I'd regret it, Daniel continued. Said I didn't understand what I was risking. The room tightened again. Because now, the timeline was approaching something else. Something they had already seen. Was that the last time you spoke to him? The detective asked. Daniel nodded. Yes. This time, the word landed differently. Cleaner. More certain. Because this part was true. The detectives exchanged a glance. Then they opened the second file. Mark Halperin, Flagstaff, 2017. They turned it so Daniel could see. Photos. A car, crumpled, off the road. Dry earth, shallow ravine.
No skid marks.
No signs of another vehicle. At least none that had been officially recorded. Daniel stared at the images. Longer than he had looked at anything else. That's him, he said quietly. Not a question. A statement. You said you stopped paying him, the detective said. You said he threatened to come back. Daniel didn't respond. 3 weeks later, the detective continued. He's dead. Single car accident.
No witnesses.
Case closed. The words settled slowly. Because the pattern was too close. Too familiar. Did you go to Arizona, Daniel? The detective asked. The question landed hard.
Direct.
No room to deflect. Daniel didn't answer. Not right away. His breathing shifted again. Slower. Measured. Like he was choosing each movement carefully.
No, he said.
But the word didn't carry the same weight as before. Because now it felt thinner. And the detectives felt it. Because they had seen this before. Not just in this case. In others. The moment where the truth splits. Where one confession leads to another. Or stops just short of it. You expect us to believe that's a coincidence? The detective asked. Daniel's eyes lifted again. Tired. But sharper now. I didn't kill him, he said. Not I wasn't there. Not I don't know what happened. Just that. I didn't kill him. The distinction mattered. Because it left space. Space for something else. Something not yet said. The room went quiet again. But this silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. Because Lena Carter's death had been a plan that went wrong. Mark Halperin's death might not have been a mistake at all. And somewhere between those two moments, 1987 and 2017, something else had happened. Something Daniel Carter wasn't ready to say. Not yet. But the truth was getting closer. Closer than it had ever been. And whatever was waiting at the center of it. was about to surface.
Whether he wanted it to or not.
I didn't kill him. Daniel Carter's voice didn't rise. It didn't crack. It landed flat on the table between them, like something rehearsed, something worn smooth from repetition. But the room didn't accept it. Not fully. Not anymore. Because the case had moved past clean statements. Now it lived in the space between words. The detective didn't challenge him immediately. Instead, he reached into the file and pulled out a photograph that hadn't been shown yet. Not the wrecked car. Not the roadside. Something smaller. A close-up. Daniel's eyes shifted as it was placed in front of him. The interior of Mark Halperin's vehicle. Driver's side door open. Steering wheel twisted. Dashboard cracked. And on the passenger seat, a phone.
Old.
Basic. The kind that doesn't do much beyond calls and messages. Recovered from the scene. Never fully examined at the time. Back then, it was just an object among others. Now, it was something else. We pulled everything we could from this, the detective said quietly. Limited data, but enough. Daniel didn't touch the photo.
Didn't need to.
He was already looking at it like he recognized something beyond the image itself. Last outgoing call, the detective continued. 10 minutes before the crash. A pause. Then the words that shifted the room again.
To you.
Silence. Not the kind that waits. The kind that settles. Daniel's eyes didn't move from the photograph. But something behind them did. A flicker. A calculation. A memory. It was a mistake, he said. Too fast. Too controlled. Phones don't dial mistakes, the detective replied. Another pause. Longer now. He called. Daniel corrected. I didn't answer. That was different. Subtle. But important. Why not? The detective asked. Daniel exhaled slowly, leaning back just enough to create distance from the table. Because I knew what he was going to say, he said. It was always the same. Money. Threats. Pressure. The cycle that never ended. So you ignored it, the detective said. Daniel nodded. And then he died, the detective added. The timing sat there, impossible to ignore. Too precise. Too close. 3 weeks after the final threat. 10 minutes after the last call. A car leaving the road.
No witnesses. No skid marks. No explanation.
You see why that's a problem, the detective said. Daniel didn't respond. Because he did. Of course he did. But understanding a problem and admitting to it aren't the same thing. The detective slid another document forward. Call logs.
Sparse.
Fragmented. But clear enough. Not just one call, he said. There were others, leading up to that night.
Short.
Repeated. Increasing in frequency. Daniel's jaw tightened again. Because this wasn't new information to him. It was confirmation. He was pushing harder, Daniel said quietly. The first honest tone in his voice since the photo hit the table. How hard? The detective asked. Daniel hesitated. Then answered. He said he had proof, he said. That changed things. Proof of what? The detective asked. Daniel let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but without any humor. Of Lena, he said. Said he kept something. Said he was smarter than me. That he didn't trust me enough to walk away empty. Insurance. Not money. Evidence. A backup plan. Did he tell you what it was? The detective asked. Daniel shook his head. No, he said. Just that it existed. Said if anything ever happened to him, it wouldn't disappear. That detail hit differently. Because now Mark wasn't just a blackmailer. He was a man who expected something to happen to him. A man who planned for it. What did you think he meant? The detective asked. Daniel's eyes flicked up briefly. Exactly what you think he meant, he said. The implication was clear. Mark believed he was in danger. And he believed that danger came from Daniel. Did you threaten him? The detective asked. No, Daniel said immediately. Too immediate. Too sharp. But the detective didn't push that angle yet. Instead, he leaned back slightly, shifting the pressure. You said you told him it was over, he said. That you weren't paying anymore. Daniel nodded. And he didn't accept that, the detective continued. Another nod. So, what did you do after the last call? The detective asked. Daniel looked down again. This time, the hesitation was different. Not defensive. Reflective. I waited, he said. For what? For him to do something, Daniel replied. To show up, to call again, to follow through. But he didn't. At least, not in the way Daniel expected. Instead, there was a crash. A body. A closed case. You didn't find it strange, the detective asked, that he dies right after escalating his threats? Daniel's lips pressed together. I did, he said. But you didn't report anything, the detective added.
No. Why?
Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because the answer wasn't simple. Because reporting it would have meant explaining everything. Lena. 1987. The truth. I didn't want to open anything back up, he said finally. And there it was.
Fear.
Not of Mark. Not anymore. Fear of the past. Of what would come with it. So you let it go, the detective said. Daniel nodded. I thought maybe it was over, he said. But it wasn't. Because nothing like this ever ends clean. Not when it starts the way it did. The detective reached for one more item. Smaller than the others. An evidence bag.
Inside, a single object.
A flash drive. Recovered from Mark Halperin's belongings. Not in the car. Not in plain sight. Hidden. Taped beneath the lining of a travel bag found at his last known residence. It hadn't been examined back then. No reason to. Now it was everything. Daniel's eyes locked onto it immediately. Recognition.
Sharp.
Unmistakable. You know what this is, the detective said. Not a question. Daniel didn't answer. But he didn't need to. Because his reaction had already said enough. This is what he meant, the detective continued. His insurance. The word echoed. Because now it had a different meaning. Not money. Protection. Leverage. We haven't opened it yet, the detective said. A calculated lie. Or maybe not. Either way, it didn't matter. What mattered was what Daniel believed.
And right now.
He believed everything was about to surface. You said you didn't kill him, the detective added, voice steady. But whatever's on this might tell a different story. The room closed in. Not physically. But psychologically. Because this wasn't about proof anymore. It was about pressure. And pressure reveals what silence hides. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Just enough to close the distance between himself and the table. Between himself and the past. His eyes didn't leave the flash drive. Where did you find it? He asked. The question slipped out before he could stop it. Another crack. Another piece falling away. Why does that matter? The detective replied. Daniel didn't answer. Because it mattered too much. Because if they had it, then everything Mark had held over him for years was no longer hidden. It was here. In this room. About to be exposed. And whatever was on that drive, whatever Mark had kept, was about to change the shape of this case again. Because Lena Carter's death wasn't just a murder. It was a secret. And secrets don't stay buried forever. They wait. They rot. They build pressure. Until one day, they break. And when they do, they don't just reveal the past. They rewrite it.
And right now,
that moment was getting closer. Closer than it had ever been. And Daniel Carter could feel it. Because for the first time in 37 years, he wasn't in control of what came next. Daniel Carter kept his eyes on the flash drive. Not blinking. Not moving. Just staring at it like it wasn't a piece of plastic and metal, but something alive. Something breathing. Something that had followed him for decades and had finally caught up. The room stayed quiet. Deliberately quiet. Because silence at this point wasn't absence. It was pressure. And Daniel was feeling all of it. "You didn't answer my question," the detective said finally, voice low, controlled. "Why does it matter where we found it?" Daniel swallowed. A small movement, but visible. Because now there was no safe direction left to go. Because he started, then stopped. The word hung incomplete. A door half open. The detective didn't push. Not yet. He let Daniel sit in it. Let him hear his own voice echo back at him. "Because what, Daniel?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then, "Because he told me he hid it somewhere no one would look," Daniel said. The admission slipped out before he could reshape it. Too late to pull back. "And you knew about it," the detective replied. Not a question. A fact. Daniel exhaled slowly. Yes. There it was. Another layer gone. Another piece of the past stepping forward. "What's on it?" the detective asked. Daniel shook his head slightly. "I don't know exactly," he said. "He never showed me. Just described it." "Described what?" the detective pressed. Daniel's eyes finally lifted from the flash drive. Not fully to the detective. But close. "Proof," he said. "Something that ties everything together. Something that would make sure I couldn't deny it if it ever came out. A safeguard. A weapon. Something Mark had built over time." "Audio," Daniel added after a second. He said there was audio. That changed the air again. Because audio doesn't blur. It doesn't fade like memory. It captures moments. Voices.
truth.
"What kind of audio?" the detective asked. Daniel hesitated. Then answered. "That night," he said. The room tightened instantly. 1987. Marlowe Street. The confrontation. "You're saying he recorded what happened?" the detective said. Daniel nodded. "I didn't know at the time," he said quickly. "I swear. I didn't know until years later when he started calling again." But Mark knew. Of course he did. Men like him don't step into situations without protecting themselves. Especially not situations that can go wrong. "And you believe that recording is on this drive?" the detective said. Daniel didn't respond. Because belief wasn't the right word. He knew. The detective reached for the evidence bag, lifting it slightly, letting it catch the light. Such a small thing. So much inside it. "If that's true," the detective said, "then everything you've told us we're about to hear for ourselves." Daniel's jaw tightened again. Not in denial. In anticipation. Because hearing something is different from saying it. Hearing it removes control. Removes interpretation. It becomes fixed.
permanent.
Do you want to add anything before we open it? The detective asked. A final chance. A final door. Daniel didn't answer immediately. His eyes drifted again. Back to that place. That night. That moment. I told you what happened, he said quietly. But there was something missing in that statement. Something incomplete. The detective leaned forward slightly. Did you? He asked. The question wasn't aggressive. It was precise. Because they both knew. People rarely tell everything the first time. Daniel's breathing shifted again. He looked down at his hands. At the faint tremor that had returned. And then, slowly, there's something else, he said. Another crack. Wider this time. The room stilled completely. Because this was it. The part that hadn't surfaced yet. The part that didn't fit. What is it? The detective asked. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Then, opened them again. There was a second call, he said. Not the one from the night of the crash. Something earlier. After I told him no, Daniel continued. After I cut him off, he called again. And, the detective asked. Daniel's voice dropped. He wasn't asking for money anymore, he said. That changed everything. What was he asking for? The detective pressed. Daniel hesitated. Then, he said he wanted to come back, he said. Not to threaten me, not to expose anything. He said he wanted to fix it. Fix it. The same word. The same idea. But decades later. What does that even mean? The detective asked. Daniel shook his head. I don't know, he said.
He just kept saying it.
Said he'd been thinking about it for years. Said we didn't finish what we started. The phrase lingered. Unfinished. Unsettled. What did you say? The detective asked. Daniel looked up now. Fully. I told him there was nothing to fix, he said. That it was done. Over. Buried.
But Mark didn't see it that way.
He said it wasn't, Daniel continued. He said things don't stay buried forever. That eventually they come back. He was right. They always do. And then, the detective asked. Daniel's lips pressed together. He said he was coming anyway, he said. The room tightened again. Because now the timeline shifted. This wasn't just a blackmailer pushing for money. This was a man returning to the scene. A man who believed something was unfinished. Did he say when? The detective asked.
No, Daniel said.
Just soon. And 3 weeks later.
He was dead.
A silence settled over the room. Different from before. Heavier. Because now, the pattern wasn't just suspicious. It was deliberate. You didn't think that was important to mention earlier? The detective asked. Daniel didn't respond. Because there was no answer that made sense. Because leaving it out was a choice. Why now? The detective pressed. Why tell us this now? Daniel looked back at the flash drive. At the thing that might already hold the answer. Because if it's on there, he said slowly, then you're going to hear it anyway. And that was the truth. Whatever Mark recorded, whatever he kept, it wasn't just evidence of the past. It was a voice. A moment. Frozen in time. Waiting. The detective nodded slightly. Then placed the flash drive back on the table.
Carefully.
Deliberately. This is where things change, he said. Not dramatically. Just fact. Because, once they opened it, there was no going back. No more interpretations. No more controlled narratives.
Just sound.
Just truth. Or something close to it. Daniel leaned back again. For the first time since the interrogation began, there was something else in his expression. Not just tension. Not just fear. Something deeper. Something closer to resignation. Like he understood what was coming. Like he had been waiting for it longer than anyone realized. Because for 37 years, the story had lived in his head. Controlled. Edited. Adjusted.
But now.
It was about to exist outside of him.
Permanent.
Unchangeable. And whatever that recording held, whatever Mark had captured that night, was about to decide everything. Not just what happened in 1987, but what happened after. And maybe what really happened in 2017. The detective stood slowly, took the evidence bag, and moved toward the door.
No urgency. No ruse.
Just procedure. But the air followed him. Heavy.
Charged.
Because this wasn't just another step in an investigation. This was the moment everything would surface. The moment the past would stop being memory and start being proof. And Daniel Carter sat there, watching it leave the room, knowing that whatever came next, he wouldn't be able to control it anymore. The flash drive disappeared behind the interrogation room door. For several seconds, Daniel Carter didn't move. He remained seated beneath the harsh white light, staring at the empty space where the evidence had been. A space that somehow felt heavier than when the drive was still there. Because now the truth was no longer hidden. It was waiting. Across the building, investigators prepared the extraction process. The drive was decades old, recovered from a man who died in a lonely roadside crash, hidden like a final message, a final insurance policy. Everyone in the room understood what it could mean. If Mark Halperin had recorded that night in 1987, then the entire case was about to change. Not theories. Not suspicions. Not memories. Evidence. The kind that survives arguments. The kind that survives time. The kind that destroys every lie built around it. The forensic technician connected the device. For a moment, nothing happened. No files appeared.
No hidden folders. No obvious clue.
Just a blank screen. Then, one folder. Created date, 1997. The room became silent. 10 years after Lena Carter's death. 10 years after the staircase. 10 years after everyone thought the truth had disappeared. Inside the folder were dozens of files. Photographs. Documents.
Audio recordings.
And one file with a simple name. LC. Lena Carter. The technician paused before opening it. Because sometimes the hardest part of an investigation isn't finding the evidence. It's facing what it proves. The audio file was only 12 minutes long. 12 minutes that had waited almost 4 decades. The investigators pressed play. Static. A faint hum. Then voices. At first, unclear.
Distant.
But recognizable. A man. Then another. Then a woman. The room froze. Because there was no mistake. It was Lena. Her voice.
Alive.
Angry. Afraid. The recording began in the middle of an argument. You said nobody would be here. Daniel. Younger. 37 years earlier. I didn't know she'd come back early, he said. Another voice answered. Mark.
Calm.
Controlled. She knows too much now. A sentence. Simple. But devastating. The investigators exchanged looks. Because suddenly, the past was no longer a mystery. It was speaking. The audio continued. Lena's voice rose. What are you doing in my house? A pause. Then Daniel. Lena, listen to me.
No.
Her answer came immediately. Strong. Defiant. No, you listen to me. Something is wrong. You both are lying. The recording captured movement. Footsteps. A chair shifting. Breathing. Then Mark. You're making this harder than it needs to be. A cold sentence. The kind that reveals a person. Not through what they say, but how they say it. Lena understood. The danger. You're not supposed to be here, she said. Mark didn't answer. And in that silence, investigators heard something terrifying. Lena knew. She knew exactly what kind of situation she was in. The recording continued. You think I'm stupid? She said. I know what you're doing. Daniel tried to calm her. But his voice carried something different now. Not anger.
Fear.
Lena, please. Please what? A pause. Please help you cover this up? Silence. Then.
A sound.
A struggle. The recording shook slightly, as if the device moved. Someone breathing heavily. Lena shouting. Get away from me. Then Mark. Daniel. Just one word. But it carried a command. And Daniel responded. Not with refusal. Not with shock. With action. Stop, Daniel said. But he wasn't telling Mark to stop. He was telling Lena. The investigators listening to the recording felt the weight of that moment. Because that was the moment Daniel Carter chose. Not his wife. Not the truth. The plan. The audio continued. The argument became louder. A struggle. Something fell. Then a sudden impact. A sharp sound. Followed by silence. Only breathing remained. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Mark's voice. She's alive. A pause. Daniel sounded terrified. What do we do? And then came the sentence that changed everything. The sentence that proved this was not a tragic accident. Not a moment of panic. Not a mistake. Mark said, "We finish it." The room went completely still. Because there it was. The truth. Not hidden. Not buried. Recorded. The investigators listened as the next minutes unfolded. Daniel crying. Arguing. Saying they couldn't do this. But never calling for help. Never leaving. Never stopping it. Mark remained calm. Focused. Practical. Like he was solving a problem. They heard furniture moving. Footsteps. The staircase. Then Daniel's voice. She's my wife. The sentence almost sounded like regret. Almost. But regret after the fact doesn't erase choice. Mark answered. Then act like you want to survive. And after that. Silence. The recording ended.
No dramatic confession. No final explanation.
Just silence. The kind of silence that follows something irreversible. Inside the interrogation room, Daniel Carter sat motionless as detectives returned. They didn't need to ask if he knew. His face answered before they spoke. You knew about the recording, the detective said. Daniel looked down. Yes. Why didn't you tell us? Another long pause. Because I thought he was bluffing. The detective placed a copy of the audio transcript on the table. You knew he recorded her death. Daniel closed his eyes. I knew he recorded something. Something. Even now, after everything, the wording mattered to him. The detective leaned forward. No, Daniel. You knew he recorded everything. The room became silent again. But this time, the silence belonged to Daniel. Because there was nowhere left to hide. The investigation changed instantly. The flash drive became the center of a much larger case. Not just the murder of Lena Carter, but the possibility that Mark Halperin had documented other secrets too. Because investigators found more than one folder. More than one file.
More than one name.
And one discovery made the entire department stop. A second audio recording. Different date. Different location. Same voice. Mark Halperin. This one was recorded years after Lena's death. And it suggested something investigators had never considered. Mark wasn't just keeping evidence to protect himself. He was collecting it. Every secret. Every transaction. Every threat. Every person connected to him. He had created an archive. A personal insurance policy. And now, after his death, that archive was opening. One file at a time. The question was no longer just who killed Lena Carter. That answer was finally clear. The question became, what else had Mark Halperin been hiding? Because a man who records one crime may be protecting himself. But a man who records everything may be preparing for something much bigger. And as investigators opened the remaining files, they realized the California 1987 cold case was not the end of a mystery. It was the beginning of a much darker one. A hidden network of secrets. A trail of fear. And a final message left behind by a man who knew the truth would eventually return. Because Mark Halperin had spent years believing he controlled the evidence. But he was wrong. The evidence had been waiting.
And now,
it was speaking. The moment the audio recording became public knowledge inside the investigation, the entire case changed direction. For 37 years, Lena Carter's death had existed as a question. Now it existed as a voice. A voice that had survived everything. The passing of time. The fading of memories. The mistakes of the original investigation. The recording had done what no witness could do. It had brought the night back. Not as a theory. Not as a possibility. But as a moment frozen forever. And yet, as investigators continued examining Mark Halperin's hidden archive, they discovered something far more disturbing. The recording of Lena's death was not the only thing he had preserved. Mark had been collecting information for years.
names. Dates.
Conversations. Photographs.
Notes.
A private archive built by a man who trusted nobody, including the people closest to him. The first new folder was labeled with only 3 letters. DC. Daniel Carter. Inside were financial records, bank transfers, written notes, and dozens of pages describing conversations between Mark and Daniel after Lena's death. The investigators expected evidence of blackmail. They found something much colder.
Control.
Mark wasn't just threatening Daniel. He was managing him. A handwritten note from 2003 stood out. 3 words circled repeatedly. Keep him afraid. The meaning was obvious.
Fear was the chain.
Fear was what kept Daniel silent. But then investigators found another name. A name they had never seen before. Someone outside the original circle. Someone connected to the Carter family. Someone who had never appeared in the 1987 investigation. Thomas Reed.
A family friend.
At first, the name seemed irrelevant. Another person from the past. Another forgotten connection. But when detectives searched deeper, they found something unsettling. Thomas had been at the Carter house before Lena died. Several times. He had helped Daniel with repairs. He had visited the family. He was trusted. And according to Mark's notes, he knew more than he admitted. The investigators returned to the original case file. They searched every page, every interview, every witness statement. Thomas Reed's name appeared once. Only once. A neighbor mentioned seeing him outside the Carter house 2 days before Lena's death. The detail was dismissed. A coincidence. A friendly visit. Nothing more. But now, decades later, it looked different. Because investigators had learned something important about old cases. The things ignored in the beginning are often the things that matter most later. They located Thomas Reed. He was living quietly in Northern California. A different name on the mailbox. A different life. But when detectives arrived, the reaction was immediate. Not confusion. Not surprise.
Fear.
Thomas opened the door. Saw the badges. And before they said anything, he asked one question. "Did you find the recordings?" The detectives stopped. Because they hadn't mentioned recordings. Not yet. That single sentence changed the entire conversation. "How do you know about the recordings?" they asked. Thomas stared at them. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he stepped aside. Invited them in. The house was small.
Clean.
Almost empty. Like someone who didn't want to leave much behind. He sat down slowly. And for the first time in decades, another person connected to Lena Carter began telling the story. Not the official version. The real one. Thomas said he knew Daniel was in trouble in 1987. Not legally. Financially. Emotionally. Daniel's marriage was collapsing. His debts were growing. And Mark Halperin had convinced him there was an easy way out. But Thomas claimed something else. He said Mark wasn't the mastermind. Not completely. Mark liked to make people think he was in control, Thomas said. But he wasn't always. That statement raised a new question. If Mark wasn't fully in control,
who was?
Thomas looked down. Then said something investigators weren't expecting. There was someone else. The room changed instantly. Someone else. Another person connected to that night. Another secret. Another missing piece. Who? Detectives asked. Thomas hesitated. Then gave a name. Rachel Carter. Lena's mother. The name landed heavily. Because Rachel had died years earlier. She was gone. Unable to answer questions. Unable to defend herself. Unable to explain why she was now appearing inside the investigation. Thomas explained. Before Lena's death, Rachel had discovered something about Daniel. Something involving money. Something involving Mark. She had confronted them. She threatened to tell Lena. But according to Thomas, Rachel changed her mind.
Why?
Because she was afraid. She knew something bad was happening, Thomas said. But she didn't understand how bad. The detectives needed more. Thomas provided something else. A letter.
Old.
Yellowed. Hidden in a box for decades. A letter Rachel had written to Lena. But never sent. The contents were brief. Terrified. Rachel warned her daughter not to trust Daniel. Not to ignore the signs. Not to believe every explanation she was given. The final line stopped investigators. Someone in this family is protecting a secret that will destroy all of us. The words felt like a warning from the past. A warning nobody had listened to. Because Lena never received the letter. And 2 days later, she was dead. The investigation expanded again. Now the case was no longer just about a husband and a cousin. It was about a family structure built around silence. Everyone knew something. Everyone saw something. And everyone stayed quiet. The detectives returned to Daniel with the new information. They placed Thomas Reed's statement in front of him. Then the letter. Daniel's reaction was immediate. Not anger. Not disbelief.
Fear.
Real fear. "You shouldn't have found that," he whispered. The detective leaned forward.
Why?
Daniel didn't answer. Because once again, the truth was moving faster than he could control. "You told us Lena's death started with a robbery plan," the detective said. Daniel nodded. "But now we're finding people who knew something before that night." Silence. Rachel knew. Silence. Thomas knew. Silence. How many people were involved, Daniel? For the first time, Daniel looked genuinely overwhelmed. Not because he was caught. Because something he feared was happening. The past was expanding. And every person connected to it was bringing another secret to the surface. Finally, Daniel spoke. There was a reason Mark kept records. The detective waited. Because he didn't trust anyone. Not even you? Daniel looked up. Especially not me. That answer changed everything. Because if Mark didn't trust Daniel, then the recordings weren't just protection. They were preparation. For what? The detective asked. Daniel didn't respond. But he didn't need to. Because investigators already understood. Mark Halperin knew something bigger was coming. Something beyond Lena's death. Something beyond blackmail. Something that involved everyone around him. And before he died, he had made sure the truth would survive him. The archive continued opening. More files. More names. More unanswered questions. And somewhere inside that digital graveyard was the reason Mark Halperin had kept everything. The reason he had documented every conversation. Every secret. Every betrayal. Because Mark wasn't just afraid of being exposed. He was afraid someone would erase him before he could tell the truth. And now investigators were beginning to wonder. Maybe his death in 2017 wasn't the final mystery. Maybe it was the final move in a game that started decades earlier. A game where everyone had something to hide. And where Lena Carter's murder was only the first secret to come out. The discovery of Mark Halperin's archive transformed the investigation from a murder case into something far more complicated. For decades, everyone believed Lena Carter's death was the beginning. But investigators were starting to realize it may have been the end of something that started long before. A chain of decisions. A chain of secrets. A chain of people protecting themselves while allowing one woman's life to disappear beneath a false story. The files recovered from Mark's hidden archive continued to reveal new pieces of the puzzle. Some were simple. Bank records. Photographs. Old conversations. Others were more disturbing. Pages of handwritten notes describing people. Their habits. Their fears. Their weaknesses. Mark had not collected memories. He had collected leverage. And one name appeared again and again. Daniel Carter. But beneath Daniel's name was another phrase. Not a person. A warning. Watch the family. Investigators focused on that phrase. Because Mark had spent years documenting Daniel. He had documented Thomas Reed. He had documented financial problems. But why the entire family? What had he discovered? And what had he been afraid of? The answer began to emerge from a forgotten document hidden inside the archive. A scanned newspaper article from 1985. 2 years before Lena's death. The article was about a real estate dispute involving a small property company connected to Daniel's family. At the time, it appeared unrelated. A business disagreement. A financial conflict. Nothing criminal. But Mark had highlighted one name. Rachel Carter. Lena's mother. Investigators looked closer. The property company had collapsed after accusations of financial misconduct. Several investors lost money. The case never became a major criminal investigation, but there were rumors. Missing records. Unexplained transfers. Money that moved without clear explanations. And one person who had quietly walked away before the collapse. Daniel Carter's father. The deeper investigators searched, the more they realized Lena's family had been surrounded by financial secrets long before her death. The question changed again. Was Lena murdered because she discovered the robbery plan? Or because she discovered something much bigger? Something that threatened more than Daniel and Mark? Detectives returned to Thomas Reed. This time, they asked about the years before 1987. Thomas admitted he had known more than he originally revealed. He said Daniel had always been under pressure. Not just from debt. From expectations. From a family name that carried secrets nobody wanted exposed. Daniel wasn't born dangerous, Thomas said. He was scared. That sentence stayed with investigators. Because fear had appeared everywhere in this case. Daniel's fear. Mark's fear. Rachel's fear. Even Lena's fear. Everyone was afraid of something. But Lena was the only one who paid the final price. Thomas revealed another detail. A week before Lena died, she had contacted him. She asked questions. About Daniel. About money. About old family problems. She knew something was wrong, Thomas said. What exactly did she know? Detectives asked. Thomas looked away. I don't know. But his hesitation suggested otherwise. Detectives pressed harder. Finally, Thomas admitted something. Lena had shown him documents. Documents she had found hidden inside Daniel's office. Financial records. Old transactions.
Names.
She believed Daniel was involved in something dishonest. But she didn't know how deep it went. She told me she was going to confront him, Thomas said. When? The night she died. The room became silent. Because now Lena's death was no longer only about a failed robbery. It was about a confrontation. A woman discovering something dangerous. A husband realizing he could lose everything. A secret that had to be protected. Investigators rebuilt the final 24 hours of Lena Carter's life. Morning. Lena goes to work. Normal routine. Afternoon. She visits her mother. Rachel appears nervous. Evening. Lena returns home earlier than expected. Daniel and Mark are already there. The official story says an accident happened. The evidence says something else. But now investigators had another possibility. Lena was not killed because she interrupted a robbery. She was killed because she was about to expose the truth. The difference was enormous. One suggested panic. The other suggested motive. And motive was something the original investigation never fully had. Back in the interrogation room, Daniel was confronted with the new timeline. The detective placed the documents in front of him. Your wife found these. Daniel looked at them.
No surprise. No confusión.
Just exhaustion. She shouldn't have been looking, he whispered. The detective noticed the wording. Not she shouldn't have found them. She shouldn't have been looking. Meaning Daniel believed she crossed a line. A line he had created. What were these? The detective asked. Daniel stayed silent. Daniel. The pressure increased. Finally he spoke. My family had problems. Financial problems? Yes. Criminal problems? A long pause. Then, I don't know. A weak answer. The kind that creates more questions than it answers. You spent 37 years protecting the secret, the detective said. Daniel shook his head.
No.
Then what were you protecting? Daniel looked down. And for the first time, he gave an answer that sounded less like a confession and more like regret. Everyone. Everyone. The word was bigger than him. Bigger than Mark. Bigger than Lena's murder. The investigators knew they were close to something. Something buried beneath decades of silence. But then another discovery arrived. A second device from Mark's archive. Not a flash drive. A small recorder. Recovered from a storage unit registered under an alias. Inside were dozens of recordings.
Most were ordinary.
Conversations. Meetings. Nothing important. Until one file. Recorded in 1988. 1 year after Lena's death. The title was simple. After. Investigators opened it. Mark's voice appeared immediately.
Calm.
Almost emotionless. I know what happened, he said. A pause. Then another voice. Daniel. The recording was not about Lena's death. Not directly. It was about what happened afterward. And what they heard changed the investigation again. Because Daniel wasn't the only person Mark had been controlling. There was another person on the recording. Someone who had never appeared in any report. Someone who had never been questioned. Someone who had been connected to Lena's family for years. The investigators stopped the audio. Replayed the voice. Confirmed it. Then confirmed it again. Because the name attached to that voice was impossible to ignore. A person everyone thought had nothing to do with Lena's death. A person who had stayed hidden behind grief. Behind distance. Behind silence. The case that had started with one dead woman in a California home had now expanded into something much darker. A family's secret. A hidden archive. A murder covered by lies. And a voice from the past revealing that the people who knew the truth were not strangers. They were the people closest to her. 37 years later, the question was no longer only who killed Lena Carter. The question was how many people helped keep the truth buried. Because every secret uncovered created another shadow. And inside those shadows, someone was still hiding. The changing seasons bring a sense of finality to the investigation, as the final legal and administrative loose ends are tied up, allowing the case of the 1987 California cold case to transition from an active pursuit into historical record. Detective Elena Ramirez is promoted to captain of the Criminal Investigations Division, a recognition of her exceptional leadership and her role in modernizing the department's approach to unsolved homicides. Her new office is spacious and bright, a stark contrast to the cramped, subterranean archive where she first pulled the dusty box labeled Case 87 to 4409 from the shelf. Yet, she keeps a small, framed photograph of the victim on her bookshelf, not as a reminder of a crime, but as a talisman of purpose, a visual anchor that reminds her why she puts on the badge every single morning. The department establishes a dedicated cold case task force, bearing the name of the victim, ensuring that resources will always be allocated to those cases that have slipped through the cracks of time. The initiative yields immediate results, with investigators utilizing the same familial DNA searching techniques to identify suspects in 2 other decades-old homicides, bringing unexpected peace to families who had long since given up hope. The community itself undergoes a psychological shift. The long-held suspicions and divisions that had fractured old friendships during the initial investigation are finally dissolved, replaced by a collective understanding of the tragedy. An annual memorial walk is organized by the Brothers Foundation, winding through the streets of the old neighborhood, the participants carrying candles that illuminate the darkness, a symbolic reclamation of the safety and unity that was stolen in 1987. The event raises thousands of dollars for domestic abuse shelters, drawing support from local businesses, schools, and civic leaders, transforming the anniversary of horror into a day of powerful community solidarity. The brother becomes a prominent advocate for victims' rights, speaking at national conferences, his story inspiring other survivors to confront their own past traumas and break the cycles of silence within their own families. He sells the old family assets, donating the proceeds entirely to charity, ensuring that no remnant of his father's ill-gotten wealth remains to contaminate their future. The legacy of the patriarch is effectively erased from the town's history, his name forgotten by the public, replaced entirely by the enduring memory of the young girl who dared to stand up against his tyranny. The rugged canyon in the Sierra Nevada foothills, once a bleak and terrifying graveyard, is visited by a group of volunteers who plant wildflowers and install a small, simple memorial plaque, transforming the site from a place of death into a sanctuary of quiet reflection. Nature continues its slow, unyielding work, the new growth covering the scars of the excavation, the wind through the pines sounding less like a lament and more like a peaceful whisper. The investigation has come full circle, leaving no stone unturned, no question unanswered, achieving a rare, absolute resolution in a world where justice is so often fragmented and incomplete. Every document in the massive case file is systematically cross-referenced, digitized, and locked away, but the physical evidence remains preserved in the temperature-controlled vaults of the county courthouse. Ramirez walks down the long corridors, the sound of her footsteps echoing off the polished linoleum, a rhythmic reminder of the relentless march of time that eventually brings all secrets to the light. She remembers the initial skepticism she faced when she first proposed reopening the 1987 file, the quiet murmurs from senior officers who believed that some boxes were better left unopened, that some wounds were too deep to disturb. Now, those same officers stand in line to shake her hand, recognizing that her stubborn refusal to let the case die has restored a sense of integrity and trust to the entire department. The local high school, where the victim once walked the halls, establishes a scholarship in her name, awarded annually to students who demonstrate exceptional courage, resilience, and a commitment to helping others. It is a fitting tribute to a young life cut short, ensuring that her name is associated not with the horror of her death, but with the hope and potential of the next generation. The old ranch house on the corner, which had stood as an eyesore and a silent, decaying monument to domestic terror, is finally purchased by a young couple who are completely unaware of its dark history. They spend weekends stripping away the old, peeling wallpaper, painting the exterior in warm, inviting tones, and planting a vibrant garden of roses and lavender in the front yard where police cruisers once sat. Ramirez watches the transformation from a distance during her evening patrols, feeling a strange mixture of sorrow and satisfaction as the physical remnants of the tragedy are slowly erased by the routine of ordinary life. The neighborhood children play on the sidewalk, their laughter filling the air that was once heavy with the suffocating silence of suspicion, a clear sign that the community has finally begun to heal. The Brothers Foundation opens its first physical crisis center, a state-of-the-art facility designed to provide immediate shelter, counseling, and legal assistance to individuals escaping abusive households. During the grand opening, the brother stands before the crowd, his face weathered but peaceful, as he cuts the ribbon and dedicates the building to his sister, his voice breaking with an emotion that is no longer born of guilt, but of profound triumph. He speaks of the years he spent in hiding, the psychological prison he inhabited, and how the simple act of telling the truth allowed him to step out of the shadows and reclaim his own humanity. The audience, filled with local residents, advocates, and police officers, rises in a standing ovation, a collective acknowledgement of his immense courage and the vital importance of the work his organization is doing. Ramirez stands in the back of the room, her arms crossed, a quiet smile on her face as she witnesses the ultimate transformation of a cold, forgotten tragedy into a living, breathing force for good. The files on her desk are still piled high, other victims waiting for their names to be called, other families waiting for the resolution they deserve, but for today, she allows herself to savor the victory. The 1987 case is no longer an open wound. It is a closed chapter, a testament to the fact that no matter how much time passes, no matter how deeply a secret is buried, the truth will always find a way to break through the dark. The analytical reports from the forensic laboratory are bound in a final, comprehensive volume, serving as a landmark study for criminal justice programs across the state, showcasing the power of advanced DNA phenotyping in cold case investigations. Students study the details of the window smudge and the carpet fibers, learning how microscopic remnants can bridge the gap across 4 decades, shattering the perfect alibis of the most calculated predators. The case becomes a beacon of hope for law enforcement agencies nationwide, proving that even the most stagnant, forgotten investigations can be solved with the right combination of modern technology, strategic persistence, and human empathy. Ramirez receives letters from families of victims in other states, their words filled with a desperate, fragile hope, asking if she can look at their files, if she can help them find the answers that have eluded them for years. She reads every single letter, her heart aching for their pain, realizing that the success of the 1987 case has placed a heavy responsibility on her shoulders, one that she accepts with a solemn, unwavering dedication. The transition of the department is complete. The old guard has moved on, replaced by a new generation of investigators who view cold cases not as dead ends, but as active opportunities to restore justice and heal communities. The basement archive is no longer a graveyard of forgotten souls, but a dynamic repository of active investigations, where every box is viewed as a potential breakthrough waiting to happen. The annual memorial walk grows larger with each passing year, becoming a defining event for the town, a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the unyielding strength of a community united against violence. The Brothers Foundation expands its reach, establishing satellite centers in neighboring counties, creating a network of support that ensures no victim has to suffer in silence, no child has to cower in fear. The legacy of the young girl from 1987 is no longer defined by the cold, dark ravine where she lay hidden for 39 years, but by the lives that are being saved, the families that are being protected, and the silence that has been forever broken.
Part 11.
The screen returns to the dark, cinematic ambience of the studio, the slow, rhythmic beat of a somber metronome mimicking the relentless march of time that both hides and reveals the darkest truths of human nature. The saga of the 1987 California cold case stands as a powerful testament to the reality that no secret is safe, no grave is deep enough, and no conspiracy of silence is strong enough to withstand the brilliant light of truth. A family dynamic meticulously engineered to protect a monster crumbled under the weight of its own guilt, undone by the courage of a surviving son and the clinical precision of modern forensic science. The image of the white picket fences and manicured lawns of suburban California will never look quite the same to those who know the story. A reminder that the greatest dangers often reside not in the dark alleys or strangers' vehicles, but across the dinner table, wearing the familiar face of a loved one. The young girl who vanished into the midnight fog 39 years ago has finally come home, her name restored, her story told, her memory honored by a community that refused to let her be forgotten. The heavy metal cabinets in the basement of the sheriff's department still hold hundreds of other files, hundreds of other names waiting for their own champion, their own Elena Ramirez to pull them from the shadows and demand answers from the past. The lesson of this case is clear. Justice is not defined by a statute of limitations, nor is it defeated by the death of a suspect. It is an enduring, unyielding force that echoes across decades, demanding a reckoning for the innocent. The silence that once suffocated the ranch-style house has been replaced by the active, vibrant voices of those who fight to protect the vulnerable, turning a horrific tragedy into a catalyst for systemic change. The brother stands on the coast of the Pacific Ocean, watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, feeling a profound, absolute stillness within his soul. The shadow that had chased him across a lifetime has finally dissolved into the light, leaving behind only the clear, enduring memory of the sister he loved and the knowledge that he had finally done right by her. The cold case is closed, the files are archived, and the ghosts have finally been laid to rest, but the echo of the investigation remains, a warning to the guilty and a shield for the innocent, proving that truth will always find a way to break through the dark. The screen slowly fades to black, the sound of the metronome fading away into an absolute, peaceful silence that marks the definitive end of a decades-old nightmare. In the quiet depths of the night, when the rest of the world is asleep, the cold case files seem to whisper their stories to the empty corridors of the precinct. Each manila folder is a life interrupted, a story cut short, a family left in the agonizing limbo of the unknown. For 39 years, the file of the 1987 disappearance lay silent, a monument to a failure that grew heavier with each passing year. But the resolution of this case has sent a powerful shockwave through the entire system, a reminder that no file is ever truly dead and no victim is ever truly forgotten. The modern world, with all its technological marvels and scientific breakthroughs, has provided investigators with the tools to reach back into the past and rewrite the endings of these tragic narratives. DNA, once a mysterious and theoretical concept, has become the ultimate truth-teller, a digital witness that cannot be intimidated, coerced, or silenced by the passage of time. The microscopic skin cells left on a windowsill, the faded fibers of a carpet, the partial smudge on a pane of glass, these are the silent, indestructible markers of guilt that wait patiently in the dark, ready to expose the truth when the time is right. For Detective Elena Ramirez, the closing of this file is not just a professional victory, but a deeply personal milestone that will define her career for years to come. She knows that the work is far from over, that for every case solved, there are dozens more that remain in the shadows, waiting for their own breakthroughs. Her promotion to captain has given her the authority and the resources to expand the cold case unit, to recruit a new generation of investigators who share her passion, her tenacity, and her refusal to accept defeat. They are the guardians of the forgotten, the voices for those who can no longer speak, and their success in the 1987 case has set a new standard of excellence for departments across the country. The walls of her new office are lined with the whiteboards of active investigations, each one covered in timelines, suspect lists, and forensic notes, a testament to the fact that the pursuit of justice never stops. The photograph of the young girl from 1987 remains on her desk, a silent reminder of the human cost of their work, and a constant source of inspiration during the long, exhausting hours of the night. The brother, too, has found a sense of peace that had eluded him for his entire adult life. He no longer looks over his shoulder, no longer waits for the knock on the door that would expose his complicity in his father's horrific crime. His confession, though painful and terrifying to deliver, was the key that unlocked his own prison, allowing him to step out of the shadows and live his life in the light of truth. The foundation he established in his sister's name has grown into a powerful force for good, providing hope, safety, and resources to countless individuals who are currently trapped in the same cycle of domestic abuse that destroyed his family. He has turned his personal tragedy into a legacy of survival, ensuring that his sister's sacrifice was not in vain and that her memory will continue to protect the vulnerable for generations to come. He often visits the small cemetery in Northern California, sitting quietly beneath the shade of the weeping willow tree, talking to his sister as if she were still here, sharing the progress of the foundation and the peace he has finally found. The community of Northern California has also transformed. The dark cloud that had hung over the town for nearly 4 decades finally lifting to reveal a brighter, more united landscape. The old ranch house, once a symbol of horror and suspicion, is now just another home on a quiet suburban street, its dark history fading into the background as new memories are made within its walls. The annual Memorial Walk has become a cornerstone of the community, a day of reflection, solidarity, and hope that draws people from all walks of life, united in their commitment to preventing domestic violence. The local high school scholarship continues to support young scholars, ensuring that the victim's name is associated with opportunity and success rather than tragedy and death. The town has reclaimed its safety, its trust, and its identity, proving that even the deepest wounds can heal when the truth is allowed to shine. As the final credits roll on this long, painful journey, the lesson remains clear and unyielding. The truth is an elemental force, as patient as it is powerful. It does not disappear when it is buried, nor does it weaken with the passage of time. It simply waits, resting in the quiet places, until the right voice, the right tool, or the right moment comes along to set it free. The patriarch who believed he had executed the perfect crime, who believed his power and his silence would protect him forever, was ultimately destroyed by the very things he sought to control. His legacy is one of ruin, his name erased from the town's memory, while the daughter he tried to silence has become a beacon of hope and a symbol of justice for all. The metronome in the studio slows to a final, definitive stop, the ticking fading into the quiet of the room, leaving behind a profound sense of resolution and peace. The 1987 California cold case is officially closed, but the echo of its triumph will continue to inspire, protect, and guide those who walk in the light of justice forever.